The three Jewish rebellions against Romans. Instability and conflict were nothing new to Judea in the first century of the Common Era. Conquered by the Romans in 63 BCE, Judea stayed under their rule until the empire collapsed. Policy toward the Jews, however, could hardly be considered stable. There were three groups of people the Jewish people formed: the group that wanted to be friendly with the Romans, the group that wanted to ignore the Romans and wait peacefully for the Messiah to come, and the Zealots, who were Jews that wanted to forcefully remove Romans from the Holy Land, Judea. The Zealots rebelled 3 times against the Romans.
In May of 66 Common Era, the Roman lawyer Florus sent troops to plunder Jerusalem, and the Jews retaliated, overpowering Roman garrisons all over Jerusalem. Thus began the first Jewish revolt, called the Great Revolt. The Jews' Great Revolt against Rome led to one of the greatest catastrophes in Jewish life and, in retrospect, might well have been a terrible mistake. The Roman response to this rebellion was predictably brutal. When the Romans returned, they had 60,000 heavily armed and highly professional troops. Jews all around the empire were massacred. Wanting to put down the rebellion as soon as possible, the emperor, Nero, sent Flavius Vespasian to command the Roman troops charged with quelling the Jewish resistance.
As Vespasian zeroed in on Jerusalem, Nero died, bringing chaos upon Rome. Vespasian was then proclaimed emperor, and he sent his son Titus to finish putting down the rebellion. The siege of Jerusalem was a horribly bloody affair, not only due to the Roman siege, but also to a civil war that was going on within the city. Within Jerusalem, civil war raged among the Zealots, the group that wanted all the Romans out of Judea. Jerusalem was so war-torn that its citizens had to climb over dead bodies in the temple to offer their sacrifices. Furthermore, thousands of Jews inside the city were dying of famine and plague, while Titus continued to pick away at the city's walls. The Roman armies established a permanent camp just outside the city, digging a trench around the circumference of its walls and building a wall as high as the city walls themselves around Jerusalem. Anyone caught in the trench attempting to flee the city would be captured, crucified, and placed in lines on top of a dirt wall facing into Jerusalem. By the summer of 70, the Romans had breached the walls of Jerusalem and burned the temple, ransacking and burning nearly the entire city. They took some Jews captive and slaughtered the others.
The second of the 3 Jewish rebellions was called the Kitos War, which means Rebellion of the Exile, and happened from 115 to 117 Common Era. It started in a Jewish community in Cyrene. The Jewish rebels destroyed many Roman temples and killed both Greeks and Romans. The revolt spread to Alexandria and Cyprus, where thousands of Jewish citizens were killed. The rebellions were disordered mobs rather than armies, however, and the engagements were riots rather than battles. The governor of Egypt used his legions to protect the unmolested cities, but relied on Trajan to send enough forces to put down the rebels. Trajan eventually raised an army to put down the rebellions in Cyrene and Alexandria, and at the same time he tried to prevent more rebellions among Jews in his newly won Mesopotamia regions by killing Jews in some of the major cities in the region before they had a chance to rebel. The loss of life during these rebellions was terrific, and many of the Jewish urban strongholds outside of Judea were destroyed.
The Bar Kokhba was the third major rebellion by the Jews of Judea against the Roman Empire, and the last of the Jewish-Roman wars. It lasted from 132 to 135 Common Era. Simon Bar Kokhba, the commander of the revolt, was acclaimed as a messiah, a heroic figure who could restore Israel. The revolt established the independent state of Israel in Judea, and the Romans barred Jews from Jerusalem. Although Jewish Christians hailed Jesus as the Messiah and did not support Bar Kokhba, they were barred from Jerusalem along with the rest of the Jews. The revolt was carefully planned and spread quickly, but the Roman army of 12 legions with auxiliaries fought back fiercely, and after 3 years the revolt was crushed. Many Jews were killed and villages destroyed, but many Romans also died.
And thus ended the Jewish rebellion.